Test. So yeah, looks like I'm good. Okay. I'm Phil Wyman, and this is the Wild Theology Podcast, where the world, the humans in it, and God are all wilder than we've been told.
That's your intro.
So, you'll get philosophy and theology and crazy stories that come from 30 years of pastoring,
Boring.
20 years of festival work,
Whatever.
and the mud and blood of wrestling with the living in spaces angels fear to tread.
Ooh, trying to sound interesting, are we?
Oh.
Yeah, you think you got something to say?
Yes.
Yeah, that's the problem, dimwit.
Look, I'm a lot smarter than you think.
Yeah, you tightened your shoes this morning.
Whatever. We're Phil Wyman, and this is Wild Theology, where you get to argue with your own ideas.
And lose.
That's the point. You can help support this podcast, as well as my other ongoing creative endeavors, by joining me here on Patreon. By pledging support, you'll be contributing to the ongoing release of these podcasts, and will also receive previews into the many books I'm in the process of writing. And you'll only be charged per release of creative project here on Patreon, which is 4 times a month at the most. Now in this episode, we're going to continue on the topic of Halloween. If you think the previous episodes were controversial with their challenge to the American evangelical ideas about the holiday, and get ready for a surprise in this episode. Today, I'm going to suggest that Halloween just might be the most Christian holiday on the American calendar. Might sound like a crazy contradiction, ramblings of a madman, but I believe that Halloween carries intrinsic Christian values and motifs. These Christian influences are embedded into the very fabric of the celebration and themes of the holiday. Of course, some of you are already thinking that I'm stark, raving mad lunatic, or in some way am being influenced by the demonic. Before you send for an exorcist to deliver me from this possession, at least hear me out. First, let's look at a few of the American holidays with clear Christian roots. Easter and the day of Christ's resurrection. Christmas and the day of Christ's birth, and Thanksgiving with its gratefulness to God for the embryonic roots of the United States of America and for His providence over our lives. Yes, Easter is the day of resurrection of Christ, and as Christians we remember what we understand to be the most amazing moment in world history. On that day, Christians typically get dressed up a little fancier than we do on other days of the year, and some of us will go to church to celebrate the resurrection of Christ from the dead. Those of us from more liturgical traditions may attend a Good Friday service, and if you're especially zealous, you might add Maundy Thursday, and if you've been extra devoted, you would have had ashes daubed on your forehead 40-something days before Easter and fasted in a variety of ways through Lent. Most of this happens as a reminder to Christians about the things we hold most dear, and it is a deep, abiding testament about the power of Christ and His resurrection. Of course, there's the other side of Easter, which most people are involved in. We see it in every grocery store as the holiday approaches. It's a day of flowers, chocolate, Easter egg hunts, and bunnies. And then dinner together with the family. This is what much of America sees and celebrates each Easter as it comes around. Christmas marks the birth of Christ for us. Of course, most of us realize that this was probably not the actual day of Christ's birth, and one can find all sorts of debate about the pagan origin of Christmas trees, or the date given for His birth being related to the Roman Saturnalia celebration occurring around the winter solstice, and I'm not particularly interested in those supposed reasons for avoiding Christmas. Christmas has enough problems by itself to make me want to avoid it most years. Christmas is most certainly one of the high holy days of the church, but it has been a high holy day of capitalism for over 100 years. Long before the day arrives, the Christmas advertisements appear in the stores with amazing aggression. We're encouraged to give to our relations. Maybe if we're feeling especially spiritual or generous, we'll become socially aware by giving something to the poor. More radical thinkers will help create meals for the homeless or invite people who have no families into their homes. But on the whole, Christmas is a day of celebration with family and maybe a few friends. In fact, we often fight over what part of the family we have to visit each Christmas. It is a day of giving to those we already love, and sometimes we have a hard time loving them. Now, Thanksgiving is a day much like Christmas. Instead of remembering the birth of Christ, Americans try to remember the Pilgrims whose landing in Plymouth in the first year of living in the New World was the tiny beginnings of the birth of our nation. Although, to be honest, most of us won't mention the Pilgrims on that day. This day, too, is fraught with the same capitalistic tendencies as Christmas, and with the same relational tensions. It's a gastronomical variation of the gift-giving of the Christmas season. It is one of the world's great feast days, but it, too, has become insular. It's simply a family day off for most people. Well, except for the cook, who works longer and harder than most other days of the year. Halloween, now, is an intergenerational and open family event. Every age can participate, and is particularly focused upon the children. Can you name another day that allows people the freedom to dress up strange, and dress their children even stranger, go to the neighbor's house, knock on the door, shout at them, and when they open the door, and they tell you how wonderful you look, and give you a gift for harassing them? No, of course you can't think of a day with as much silly community celebration and openness as Halloween. The fact that we live in a culture that celebrates such kookiness and expressive freedom during a season of such radical mistrust, such as we have today, is remarkable. This only touches on the community aspect of Halloween. But there is a theological component to Halloween that is remarkably Christian, and it has been in front of our faces the whole time, and somehow we've missed it. So, here are some biblical themes we find in the motifs of Halloween. Halloween and spirits. Ghosts and the variety of disembodied spirits that fill the pages and screens of horror and fantasy tales are some of the most common Halloween themes. The easiest and perhaps most familiar Halloween costume is the sheet over the head with eye holes cut into it. Who hasn't put a sheet over their head and made moaning noises pretending to be a ghost at some point in their lives? With the growth of radical materialism and its denial of the unseen realm, the introduction of spirits into the discussion of everyday life is a breath of fresh air. It is in moments like these that the possibility exists that there's more to life than what we see, earn, acquire, and do each day. There's an invisible realm of possibilities and responsibilities. This invisible realm is the realm of the Christian church. The fact that people put spiritual things out in the forefront of their celebration makes Halloween an inherently spiritual holiday. Had we paid attention to the whispering of the Holy Ghost, we might have seen opportunities instead of warnings. Halloween and the supernatural. Christianity is accused of being out of touch because of our focus upon otherworldly things. During Halloween, these are suddenly the topics of intense interest and wild celebration. With the aggressive new atheist movement, all things supernatural are rejected and, in fact, are treated as infantile obsessions. Science has become the new savior, and all things magical and miraculous are rejected as fairy tales. Halloween has given us a reprieve from the sterile material world of numbers and animal instincts. It poetically forces the supernatural back upon us. Movies with themes of magical forces, both good and evil, are timed for release in October to correspond with the coming of Halloween. People dress up in the costumes of superheroes, witches, and magical monsters of all sorts, and they live for a day as though they believe these things are real. For the Christian, who believes that a miraculous world with a powerful God underlies everything we see, this day of celebration of the supernatural should be seen as an opportunity. These are the moments when people consider that there is something more to this world than what meets the eye or is measurable by scales and scopes. Halloween and heaven and hell. The contrast of opposite and competing values like good and evil and light and dark are part of the dramatic tension that makes Halloween a day of excitement. These contrasting opposites are part of the technique of tension and resolution found in classic fairy tales and great fiction. Heroes and villains, the cruel and the innocent face off in desperation and hope. Yet there's an even more popular contrast that's seen in the celebration of Halloween. Heaven and hell is one of the most common couplings of opposites during Halloween. Halloween has taken one of the most controversial topics of the Bible and made it a popular subject. Even though our society feels that the topic of hell is a cruel and terrible thing, it gets celebrated at the end of each October. How weird is that? Weirder yet, how weird is it that most Christians have not made the connection that this just might be a good thing? Halloween and good and evil. With the contrast of good and evil, and dark and light, as part of the storyline of Halloween, the struggle of truth itself is captured in these opposing values. Angels and devils, demons and priests, monsters and heroes, murderers, villains, and innocent survivors. These are the characters of the costuming, movies, and stories attached to the season. But just when the opportunity arrives for the church to uninhibitedly portray its beliefs and values in creative ways, it hides away in fear of being perceived as a participant in some occult practice. Yes, Halloween is a world of dark evils and miraculous interventions, but that evil is almost entirely expressed in drama and role-playing. If you ask me, dark evil and miraculous intervention sounds like an overview of the Bible. When our culture finally focuses upon good and evil and sees the tension of these opposing forces in the same way the Bible describes it, we ignore the moment and hope it will go away. Meanwhile, our neighbors want to celebrate these themes. I could not have dreamed up a better cultural opportunity to be my biblical self in a postmodern world than Halloween. Now, these topics only scratch the surface of this subject. A more complete study would look into subjects such as death, demon possession, temptation and sanctification, the balance of free will and predestination, eschatology and the coming of the end of the world, angelology and demonology, and the call to be foolish for the sake of the gospel. All of these things find their source in the Christian scriptures. For now it's sufficient to note that Halloween is filled with biblical themes, and Christians all across the country have missed the boat on this one. Just when we had the opportunity to creatively express truth, we hid inside and prayed against the day. A PDF of this podcast, which you can download, is attached to the Patreon page. If you enjoyed this episode and would like to find out more about how Christians might be able to rethink their engagement with this popular holiday, you can discover more in my new book, The Reformation of Halloween, on Amazon.com. Thank you to David Gerard for his ambient music. What you heard today was 12:48 a.m. Black Rock, and you can find more of his music at bandcamp.ambientism.com. If you'd like to support this project, you can do so here on Patreon for as little as $1 a release, and at the most, that's $4 a month.
Why on earth would anybody want to support us?
Well, I think we're pretty cool, and maybe some people believe in what we're doing.
Oh, come on, you believe that?
Yeah.
Don't you ever think you're just a little too weird for the average person?
Yeah, sometimes.